Okay, that was more or less the bigger ticket items that I kind of wanted to hit on from the last couple of days of fall camp. We'll obviously learn more this week. We got a couple more practices that we get to watch. There's a scrimmage on Saturday, fan day coming up on Sunday. So it's going to be another busy week for Alabama football coverage. What I wanted to get to today is a conversation that I've been wanting to have with you guys for a little while because I think it's super, super interesting. The premise is basically, who do we think can actually win the national championship this year? There's a lot of different metrics and stories and different college football minds that tend to come together around this time of year to discuss that very point before the season takes off. And so I figured we could kind of do our own version. The assignment was to basically come up with a list of teams that we thought could do it. And we're just going to kind of hash it out and maybe debate why. Before we actually get to the teams that we have on our lists, I was kind of curious what your guys' process was when it came to developing this list. Mike, I'll throw it to you first. How did you ultimately determine the teams that ended up on your list as the teams that you believe could win it all this year?
Well, I was going back and looking at some of the preseason polls, from recent history, and because the coaches poll comes out Monday here. So I was seeing when the last time Alabama was ranked less than 5th, which has a chance of happening. The answer to that is 2008. But wow. In looking at some of those preseason polls, you kind of see who won the national championship that year and where did they start that year. And for the most part, you're in the top 6. And even to be 6 was an outlier. I think LSU in 2019 started 6. I think Georgia started 5th a couple years ago. Doesn't happen too often where it's not a top 3 team, at least in recent college football history. It did with Jimbo Fisher-led 2013 Florida State Seminoles, who started 12th that year and won the national championship. So that, of course, was the last year under the 2-team playoff, if you want to call it that, the BCS, and then you had the 4-team playoff. So in theory, your scope is widening with a 12-team playoff. To me, I would still be surprised if you have a team that's seeded 10th or 11th, especially 12th, if it's, the Liberty or Tulane of the world, that makes a run to win a national title. Maybe they make a run to win a couple games and upset people here. To actually change the outcome of the national championship, I don't know if the 12-team playoff will do that. I think it will create a little more interest along the way, but I think the best team is still going to be the best team. So I think the window or the group of teams is still pretty narrow. So I only had 5 teams. I don't know if we're unveiling it. I won't unveil my 5 teams yet, but that's my process, is that I'm being a little bit conservative in terms of the teams I truly think have a chance to win. I think there's a larger group of teams that can make the national championship game. I think there's a larger group of teams that can make the Final Four, if you will. But to actually win it, I think it's still going to be a team that is one of the most talented in college football, which means you're finishing at least, or beginning the season at least, in the top 5 right now.
I think that's fair. Alex, what was your process like in terms of you have a couple more teams than Mike does, and a few different teams than maybe I do. What was it like as you were putting this list together?
Well, I put my recliner up, I closed my eyes, and I thought, who could win a national? Who can I picture winning a national championship? And it's all
that easy, huh?
It's schedule and it's talent. And to me, I'm a little bit more on the side of the expanded playoff, giving the teams the ability to get hot. I'm banking on, if you get in as a 10th seed and you win your first game, you can build some momentum. We see that in other sports, right? We see that in the NFL. It's not unusual that a team reaches a Super Bowl that was, whatever seed it would be. And if you get to that game, you've got a shot in my mind. So I'm stretching the word can maybe a little bit further than anybody else, but it's talent. And more than anything, honestly, the way the game has gone is, do you have a quarterback who I think at the end of the day can lift a national championship trophy? And that's kind of where, if you didn't have that, I kind of ruled you out.
No, I think that's fair. I used a combination of a few different things. I looked at some of the preseason conference lists, like what teams do they think will make it to their conference championship games, and because those are the auto bids, right? And those are big. If you win your Power Four conference, you get a first round bye, and I think that's going to be bigger than maybe what people realize because of the extra time off to really let your bodies heal to get ready for that stretch run. I also looked at the blue chip ratio, which is put out by Bud Elliott every year. It's not an exact science, but it is an interesting look at just the level of talent that all these teams possess. Same thing with the 247 Sports Team Composite. I don't believe the 2024 version of that is out yet, but I was kind of looking back through past years just to see, what the accumulation of talent was. And then I kind of sat back the same as you, Alex, like, okay, one, who's quarterbacking these teams? Or two, is the talent accumulation so much that maybe who your quarterback is doesn't entirely matter because you're so good maybe on defense, or you have excellent playmakers at certain position groups on the offense. Like Michigan, for example. I don't know that J.J. McCarthy blew anybody's socks off, but they were so sound and deep defensively that it ultimately did not matter, right? And then you also had Blake Corum running behind a very, very good offensive line. So they were just so good that they really didn't need J.J. to do a whole lot. So that was more or less my process, was basically, a combination of like, all right, let's cobble a list together and then let's kind of eyeball it and see how we feel about certain position groups or the most important position groups, or what the overall talent level looked like. Before we actually reveal the teams that we think can do it, I'll throw it back out to you guys first. Are there teams you left off your list that might be intriguing, or was it maybe hard to eliminate them? Like, what are teams that you maybe wanted to include but ultimately didn't, or what was that chopping block process like? Mike, I'll throw it back to you.
I mean, honestly, Michigan was the first team out for me in terms of not in my top 5, but they would have been my 6th team, I would have considered. I don't want to sound like, I bleed scarlet and blue, but don't sleep on Michigan. What did I say? Scarlet and blue.
Scarlet and blue.
My brain.
Maize and blue.
Maize and blue.
I'm the colorblind one, Mike.
Right.
What are you doing
Yeah,
there?
you're right. That's pretty
Lion?
bad.
I don't understand what that was.
Scarlet and blue. I don't know where that came from. Maize and blue. And so, look, it's obviously, I think the quarterback is the issue with Michigan. Alex Orji is a less polished Jalen Milroe, if you will, for quoting Jim Harbaugh, Milroe being a more polished Alex Orji. But if we kind of see Milroe with all this potential because of his athleticism, then theoretically, like Alex Orji might have some similar potential because of his athleticism. There's still players like Colston Loveland at tight end, Donovan Edwards, like those guys are back from last year. They don't have Roman Wilson, they don't have Blake Corum, but maybe there's some talent at receiver there that can rise up. I don't know if that's going to be the way that they win, and we'll have to see how that plays out in a playoff game. But their defense is still very experienced. It's mostly 4th and 5th year guys. They've lost some guys, but they also have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant up front, who are both very good players. So I don't know Michigan's roster well enough, but I feel like it's a little bit tough to just say they've lost all these guys to the draft. They've lost their coach, but it's still a very similar coaching staff, and just to completely eliminate them. I think that Texas game early on is going to mean a whole lot, but Texas is kind of in the same boat. Like, they've lost a lot of guys too, but we're still considering them right up there in the top 3 or 4. So I would just be careful with Michigan is kind of the way I would put it. I do think there's a lot of reason to believe they're going to drop off a little bit, but for me to say that they absolutely won't win a national title, that was tough. Like, they were right there in the edge for me as the number 6 team.
Alex, what was maybe your first team off? Like, what was the first team that you left off your list?
I'll leave the Michigan debate for a little bit later because I think we might have that. There were 2 teams that I really wanted to talk myself into, and I couldn't. Tennessee and Florida State. Tennessee, it's just the ups. You're betting on the upside of Nico and the offense returning to what we saw under Josh Heupel 2 years ago. Plus, I think their defense has improved from where it was a couple years ago. So theoretically, if you get Hendon Hooker type production and he doesn't get hurt at the end of the year, they're in there. And they have the type of offense that would really scare some teams. That said, I don't think they're ready to be in that conversation yet. And then Florida State, you get DJ in there, and you should have a really good shot at quarterback. They lost a lot to me. Kind of the receivers, but also you lose the defensive end who just was he just destroyed quarterbacks. The transfer, I'm blanking on his name. Anyways, but just not quite enough there. And again, you're navigating the ACC, so there's a path there. But ultimately, I just could not talk myself into those two.
I didn't have Tennessee anywhere near my list for, and I'm a big fan of Nico. Like I think that's maybe arguably the third best quarterback Alabama could be playing this season. But I feel you on Florida State. Like I think it's DJU who's quarterback now at Florida State, and they've done really well accumulating talent. There's a lot of former Alabama players that transferred over there this past offseason. So we know that they're, and this isn't the first offseason that they've tapped the portal to create what looks to be a fairly good roster. I couldn't talk myself into them. I couldn't talk myself into Clemson fully just because of the quarterback. They seem to be fairly good everywhere else. I see Mike smirking now because I know he was all aboard the Clemson train earlier this year.
But that was just a bold prediction for that show. I'm not predicting Clemson having not winning the national championship. I just said they would be in the top 2 or 3 in the final college football rankings because they would get elevated as the ACC champion, and potentially with an undefeated record would be better than a 1-loss SEC team or Big Ten team that gets blemished for having a loss, because that's the way that typically the committee likes to do things. So that's all I was getting at with that, just for the record.
Mike does that one smirk.
Mike does things for the bit. Yeah, I couldn't talk myself into an ACC team. I could not, nowhere on my list was there a Big 12 team. So maybe there's just and that seems to be a theme for all three of us, that we're just totally and completely disrespecting the Big 12 and also maybe to a lesser extent the ACC. But yeah, Florida State and Clemson were probably the 2 big ones that I was like, maybe depending on the draw. And then if, can you put 1 or 2 good games together? But there's just enough question marks there that I was just like, maybe, which now leads us to the teams that we did include. And I guess I'll start with you, Mike. List off the teams that you think can do it. We'll all reveal our lists, and then we'll have a discussion about this. But Mike, I'll let you go first.
Right. Obviously, there's not going to be much debate about. We all had Georgia on our list. We all had Alabama on our list, right?
Yep.
We all had Texas on our list, yes. Right? We all had
Oregon.
Oregon would be the other one.
Oregon and Ohio State.
Ohio State, yeah. Sorry, I knew I was forgetting a big one.
We all had those 5: Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, and Oregon.
Right. So we can sit here and argue that, but I think we all agree, and I think everybody would agree that those teams have a chance to win a national title. Georgia, because of who they have returning, their coach, their talent. Ohio State, because of their talent. Oregon, because they have a pretty good quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, who replaces Bo Nix, and this is a team that you can argue with their schedule and in some weaknesses last year. Was a very good team last year. Texas, a lot of losses, but I think a lot of people still believe in Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian that realistically could get them to win a national title. So, we don't have to waste time on those. And Alabama, obviously, I think we all agree, still capable of getting there. So, really, for me, not expanding beyond those 5 is a discussion about Ole Miss and a discussion about Notre Dame and a discussion about LSU, Florida State, Tennessee, go right down the list. And I think I'll focus on Ole Miss. That I voted them 3rd in my preseason SEC poll. I think they can, because of their schedule, finish that high in the SEC. I think they can go to the SEC championship game. Can they win a national title with Jackson Dart is my question. I'm not sure. I've seen enough of Dart the last couple of years in big games against Alabama that I just would have some doubts. And I just would have doubts about a Ole Miss team that's steamrolling people and is 10 or 11-0, 12-0 by November. And, Billy Napier's on the beach already because he's been fired by Florida, as Alex has talked about. And there's already talk about Lane Kiffin and would he go to Florida? Is he going to go somewhere else? He's the hottest commodity on the market. I think to preserve that team and keep them together, a team that is very transfer heavy into December to make a run and stay together, do everything they need to do. And, Lane's personality is a little bit all over the place too. I just don't know if I see that I mean, the national championship game is January 20th. Can you imagine Florida firing Billy Napier on like October 5th and then waiting until January 20th to hire Lane Kiffin? Like, that's tough. And what is Lane supposed to do in that situation if he truly wants that Florida job? Tell Scott Strickland to go, hike a mountain? Like, take a hike.
The mountains of Florida.
Right. Like, what do you
go hike a mountain?
Go float in a canoe? Like,
we're going to, I mean, in all seriousness, we're going to get to a point.
Right. Like,
we're going to get to a point where there's a coach who's coaching a team in the playoff who's already agreed to another job. Like, that's going to it almost happened with Notre Dame and Brian Kelly.
That is a massive amount of time to wait for a coach.
They're not going to. No.
So, like, what do you do if you're Lane and you truly want that Florida? Do you resign as Ole Miss's coach when you're 8-0 in October? Like, what do you do?
Well, we know how well he did handling two jobs last time, and it resulted in being fired by Alabama.
Right. So, I just think that's a messy situation, and I have a hard time seeing Ole Miss keeping it all together until the third week of January, which people need to remember is now when the national championship game is being held.
Those 5 schools that we all, again, put the train back on the tracks here. Those 5 schools that we all have as capable of winning a national championship or teams that we believe can win a national championship this year: Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon. Mike, that is your list. And that's it. Like, that's all you've got. Alex and I both have a couple other teams on our list, but they're a different couple other teams. And the reason you're talking about Ole Miss here is that, Alex, Ole Miss is on your list. And I'm curious as to why.
Do I believe they're going to win a national championship? No. Do I believe they're going to reach a national championship? No. Am I certain they're going to reach the playoff? No. But they have the talent. They've built their roster for this. They have the schedule for this. They got a returning quarterback and returning coordinators. They went out and they already had a good receiver core, and then they added Juice Wells from South Carolina. I mean, they upgraded on defense. They got Princely from Florida. I'm not even going to try to say his last name. He's a really good edge rusher. Walter Nolan, one of the most talented interior linemen from Texas A&M. They did the things they were supposed to do. So if they do what they're supposed to during the season, if they reach an SEC championship game, their potential is a national championship. For all the reasons Mike talked about, I don't know that they can necessarily reach that potential. I still have significant concerns about the number of new faces, not just this season, but last season, and what continuity actually means. But when you have all of those pieces in place and you've got a Lane Kiffin calling plays, you can win any game you play. It's just a matter of, can they do that consistently week after week? So again, I stretched the definition of can a little bit further than some people, but I think talent alone, I think they have to be in that conversation.
I think that's fair. Yeah, the belief that they can is different from the belief of whether or not they will. Mm-hmm. And so I can appreciate that, which is what I think is making this conversation so interesting. Alex, you also had another team on your list. I'm going to let you reveal it and explain why, because I'm very curious about why you also included this team.
I think we're sleeping on Notre Dame. And there's a couple of reasons for that, right? There's, just like Ole Miss, go look at their schedule. If they beat Texas A&M week 1, and that's when you want to get Texas A&M, they basically have smooth sailing until November. And when they play Florida State, and then your last game, then the only other game that's going to really be a marquee game is the end of the season against USC. So the schedule's manageable. They upgraded at receiver. They upgraded at quarterback, bringing in Riley Leonard from Duke, who I think is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, probably the best quarterback in the ACC. They have Benjamin Morris, one of the best cornerbacks in all of college football. And oh, by the way, probably made the best coordinator move of the offseason, getting Mike Denbrock from LSU. So they're going to be a balanced offense. We know what they bring to the table every year defensively because they recruit a specific style. Freeman's a really good coach on that side of the ball. I just think this should be the year. I honestly think this is a make or break year for Freeman in terms of, which way are they going to go, because they've been building toward this and have not been ashamed about understanding they need a higher caliber of talent. I think this is the year they can potentially break through.
I think the schedule point is good too. It's just I think it's like in terms of the conversation of getting to the playoff, I think the schedule is paramount. Like it's going to mean a lot. In terms of winning those 4 games in the playoff, at that point, your schedule can't protect you unless you're in a situation where this would be interesting too. Let's imagine Notre Dame is undefeated. They don't play a conference championship game. They're 12-0 going into Selection Sunday in December. And you have them and you have the SEC championship game loser, who is a 1-loss team that just lost to probably the number 1 team in the country. Who is your number 5 seed? An undefeated Notre Dame team or an SEC championship game loser that is a 1-loss team? That would be controversial because whoever's the number 5 seed is playing the number 12 seed. And almost certainly your number 12 seed is going to be a group of 5 team. Liberty, Memphis, Boise State, one of those. Whereas your number 11 seed is probably a more legitimate opponent. And so that 5 versus 6 seed conversation is going to be pretty important. Because if you're playing a number 12 seed at home, you're playing Boise State at home and Notre Dame, like, come on, they're going to be a 2-touchdown favorite, easy. You're playing Penn State at home, it's going to be different. So I think we're going to find out. There's no data yet, but how realistic will it be for a team that has to play a first-round playoff game? How realistic is it for them to win a national championship? Because then you're winning 4 games in a row, especially if you're doing it on the road as a 9 through 12 seed. So that would be my question. How realistic, if you don't have that first-round bye, to win those 4 games in a row, you're going to have to win beyond your schedule that you already played. As easy as the schedule might have been from September through November, to play 3 games in a row against top 12 teams, top 11 teams, that's a lot to ask, I think, for a lot of teams.
I don't think this is necessarily, it's obviously not a conversation for the 5-12 scenario, but I wonder if the first round bye is necessarily always going to be a good thing, because we are talking about college football and a long layoff and what that means when we're talking about young men playing the sport. I think part of the problem with Alabama's offense last season was Jalen Milroe got out of sync, and with that long layoff and playing Michigan, I think he just looked rusty for a big chunk of that game. So does rust come into the equation when you do have one of those buys? I think you take the buy, don't get me wrong. Like, you obviously want to have that, but I think the fluidity of college athletes, the unpredictability is probably a better word. I wonder if that can cut both ways for that first round bye in any kind of scenario. I think it could get really interesting for some of those teams that necessarily did not take advantage of the long layoff.
Well, the portal is going to be open too. I mean, players can go in the portal for those playoff teams starting the Monday after Selection Sunday for, I think it's 30 days now. They keep changing it. I'm pretty sure it's 30 days. So you potentially are losing players off your roster, guys who are second and third string guys that are saying, yeah, it'd be great to stay for the playoff, but I need to find a job for next year. And you have teams swooping in with better offers that are already out of the playoff. And that becomes a distraction. I think it was this past year. I mean, you had several Alabama players leave in December. So, how do they manage that as well? Again, because you have a long wait. If you're a player who's thinking, I'm going to leave this team, you have to wait all the way to January 20th. The team that wants you has to wait all the way until January 20th. Can you have a wink nod deal that you're going to leave? I guess, but I don't know. That whole kind of awkward 6 to 8 weeks there, it's only getting longer and it's only getting more awkward. So that's potentially problematic to me.
The Notre Dame point is interesting. The Denbrock hire, obviously, I think is going to do wonders for them. For whatever reason, I just feel like I got to see it first. And I don't, I didn't put them on my list. I don't know that I had them anywhere near close to my list. I know that they've been recruiting very well. I know that the 3rd year of Marcus Freeman, there's a lot of intrigue around the program. It's probably another one of those, yeah, they probably can, but I personally just don't think they will. And so, you make a lot of good points, though. That's a team that, now I'm going to pay a little bit more closer attention because of the points that you made, Alex. The other 2 teams that I had on my list, in addition to the 5 that we all have, Michigan, because I love the infrastructure that they still have. I know Harbaugh's gone. I know that a lot of turnover, a lot of guys left for the NFL draft. So they, but I still the infrastructure of the program that Harbaugh had built for the last, 5, 6, 7 years. And there's still a lot of talent on that team, specifically a lot of talent on that defense. And I guess I believe a little bit more in Alex Orji. It's interesting. I put Michigan on my list and left LSU off my list for similar reasons. Like LSU, like they lost Denbrock. They lost a lot of talent. They're still very, very good. They might have one of the best offensive lines in college football this year. I don't know that I believe in Garrett Nussmeier. I think I believe in Alex Orji a little bit. I think he just gives them a wider range of possibility, and I just believe in the infrastructure and the coaching staff to hopefully get the best out of him. So I put Michigan on my list. The other team I put on my list, I put Mizzou on my list. Maybe this is a little bit of a homer thing, but you talk about the schedule. They play a bunch of tomato cans. That you look at who they have returning. They have a returning quarterback. They've got Luther Burden. They did pretty well in the portal, adding not just on offense, but also on defense. There's a lot of talent on that defense. I know they lost Baker to LSU, their defensive coordinator, who had done a lot of really good things with Mizzou the last few years. If you go talk to Georgia, for example, like their toughest regular season game for the last few years has been Mizzou. Mizzou has found a way to play those good teams really, really well. They may not win those games, but they always compete in those games and give themselves opportunities to win those games. And I think another year of experience for Brady Cook, another year of learning how to unlock all that Luther Burden has to offer. And by the time they play some of those bigger games, I think Alabama's late October. I'm not saying they're going to come into Tuscaloosa and win, but they'll know how to use all the pieces at their disposal. And perhaps they can set themselves up in the playoff in that 7-10 matchup, whether they're home or away. And I don't know. There's something about this Mizzou team that I think has the capability of doing it. Again, I don't know that they will. I'm a firm believer in one of the top 5 on all of our lists that'll probably win the thing. But there's something really intriguing about this Mizzou team, man. I don't know. What do you guys think about Mizzou, Michigan?
There are 3 reasons why I don't like Mizzou. One is losing Baker. I think that was a very significant loss.
I agree.
As a coordinator, he really did improve that unit, and I don't know if they can replicate that. The second is losing Cody Schrader, the running back. Everything went through him. He was the definition of Mr. Reliable for that offense if we want to bring this thing all the way around. And I do think while the talent at running back might be pretty good overall, that dependability, that toughness that he brought to the table, I think that was their secret sauce last year. And I think losing that's going to be huge. And the third thing is kind of a wild card, but in the same way we think that the potential of a job opening might mess with Lane Kiffin, I wonder if Eli is in that mix, how he navigates that, because that is going to be, for anybody who's going to be the hot name, they're going to have to navigate in a weird way, and I think Eli is going to be in that mix. Not saying I don't think he can handle it well. He's a sharp guy, but that's a lot going on at one time, as we've already covered. So at the end of the day, again, my process was like a caveman. I closed my eyes and I pictured who I thought looked right holding a national championship, and Mizzou to me just did not fit the bill.
No, I think that's fair. And again, while I think they can, I'm not sure that they will. It probably takes too many things to come together for Mizzou to actually scale the mountain. But this could also be one of those funny years where I see it sets up for them to, because you got to think, if they're in that 7-10 game, like I was alluding to earlier, you find a way to win that one. And given their schedule, they could very well be the 7 seed, depending on how everything else breaks. So you win that one at home. Then if the bracket shakes out like I think it will, they'll get number 2, which we think could potentially be the Big Ten champ. If Oregon and Ohio State trade wins and losses, it could potentially be the ACC champ. So then you're talking, okay, you got enough talent to get through a Clemson or a Florida State. Then you're in the semifinals. Can you put one more good game together to get to the final game? Again, that's probably the most optimistic view of Mizzou potentially sneaking into the final game of the season. And again, it's going to take a lot for them to go right, but I don't know. I believe in the talent and what they've been able to put on the field for the last couple of years. And maybe, again, homer pick, but maybe.
I think there's a difference between, like, for me, who can get to the Final Four, who can get to the national championship game, and who can win a national championship. Because it's like college basketball. I think there's more opportunity when you have an expanded playoff for teams to get hot and make a run. NC State makes the Final Four in basketball. But at the end of the day, UConn was still UConn. Like, UConn was still better than everybody else. They had the best players. They had the best coach. They just were better. And I think ultimately that's what's going to show up is you're going to have a Georgia or an Ohio State or an Alabama or whoever that just is better because they have the best players. And for the little engine that could, which I think Missouri is still in that category, like I don't think their talent is up to par yet. Overall, I mean, I think Luther Burden's a great player, but overall, that talent, I just don't think is good enough to win 4 games in a row to win a national championship. To me,
I think that's fair. I'm of the belief too, but I just, for whatever reason, I can't get them out of my head, and so they're just one of those intriguing teams to watch for a number of different reasons. Probably because they're on Alabama's schedule, and that's really their toughest game of the year outside of a road trip to A&M. So
the team you need to get out of your head is Michigan. I just don't see it. I think what J.J. McCarthy did at quarterback was vastly underrated within that offense. He was consistent, did not turn the football over, and when they needed to play, he made it. They were so veteran laden, like 6th, 7th year seniors last year, which is why I think they were so consistent and could weather the storm that was last year. And then I think there's going to be a vacuum, right? An emotional vacuum of, man, we put everything into 2023. Like they had the NIL campaign one more year. It was Harbaugh's last hurrah. Everybody knew it. It was us against them. The whole world was going. I mean, the whole thing was one bucket. And then you won and you threw the bucket in the air and everything's out. And it's like, oh, crap. What do we have to put back in the bucket? I don't think it's very much. I think, and not just that, you continue to have off the field issues. This Sharon Moore thing is not going to go away. The NCAA infractions thing is not going to go away. Connor Stallions is not going away. And, oh, by the way, Ohio State upgraded. I just don't see it for Michigan this year. I think they're still solid, but I don't think they're in the championship conversation.
So you're saying you're not a big orgy guy?
I'm not going to say those words on a recording of any sort. It's not. It's not. Family company, midway through something. I'm not going to say a sentence like that.
That's funny. My thought on Michigan is that, yes, they lost a lot of talent. Yes, Harbaugh's no longer there. Yes, there's a lot of off the field stuff. So I think, like, from a team talent perspective, they're probably starting with a slightly lower floor. I think Orgy gives them a higher ceiling than what JJ ever gave them. And if they can unlock his full potential, I think there's enough there to maybe make up the fact that they're starting with a lower floor and makes them a very interesting team. I don't even think they're going to win the Big Ten, but that's a team where, like, if they get hot and Alex Orgy is, they unlock all the, I don't even think he needs to be that good, right? But if they just unlock his full potential and find a way to put all the pieces together, that's a very intriguing team.
I'm trying to think, when's the last time a non-senior quarterback won a national championship? It's been a few years, right?
It depends how you define Stetson Bennett in 2020.
He was like a senior citizen. What are you talking about?
Is a 6th year a senior if you play 7th year, or are you junior then?
You're still
the last time a
fourth year or more player,
right?
It seems like to me,
Tua. If you,
yeah,
you're
saying a while ago, right?
He played like a half, but
yeah,
of that national championship game.
You need a veteran quarterback as part of this equation. You need a few years to get to the point where you can win those games. And I think it might take a year or two with Orgy. And I think the other part of it is Harbaugh also didn't do Michigan any favors by going and taking many of their best assistant coaches with him on that side of the ball. They lost a lot of key pieces there. Mentor being gone as coordinator, I think, is huge, even if he was getting some help knowing what was coming. I think there's a pretty decent bit of turnover, but the quarterback thing, it was sitting back here thinking like, yeah, Orgy might have really good upside, but I think that upside might not be realized until 2025.
Deshaun Watson would have been a senior when they beat Alabama.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence was a freshman.
Yeah.
But he didn't beat.
It's been a while.
Trevor Lawrence win a national title?
Yeah. They shredded Alabama that first year.
Yeah.
Who was the quarterback in that championship game now?
Trevor Lawrence.
As a freshman, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Because Kelly Bryant was benched for Lawrence. All right. Okay. That was a long time ago, man.
That's what I'm saying.
a long time ago and somewhere else in a different state.
So Alex doesn't agree with Michigan. Mike doesn't agree with Mizzou. Mike and I don't agree with Ole Miss and Notre Dame. At least I don't agree with Notre Dame. I don't know. Mike didn't seem like he agreed fully with Notre Dame, but they're intriguing teams all the same.
I like Riley Leonard. I just don't know that whole roster overall, but I mean, yeah, I think of the quarterbacks, Riley Leonard gives you a shot.
I have a question. Of our top 5 that is consistent, who do we believe least in?
Least in?
Oregon.
Yeah. I don't know. It's between Oregon, Texas, and Alabama for me, but I would probably go
half of your top 5. You got to pick 1 or 2.
Right. Yeah, it's for different reasons. Like I think Oregon, you're just wondering how the schedule translates because it's going to be a tougher run for them. I think with Texas, you're wondering about all the losses. With Alabama, you're wondering just about the newness of everything. I wouldn't lean towards Oregon. I think they're just the biggest unknown in the Big Ten for me.
Yeah, the Oregon thing, I agree. I think it's universal with Oregon that I think we talk ourselves into them more than they've realized their potential. And there's a staff in Tuscaloosa that can attest to that, right? They kept getting picked against them, and they kept beating them. So, I just wondered, like, are they a team with a lot of talent, or are they a team that can win meaningful football games?
Just like people talk themselves into Dan Lanning as the Alabama coach. But
Zing! Yeah, no, I worry about Oregon's trenches. I wonder – they're going from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel. Like they're going from a very efficient, low-risk quarterback to a guy that is very high volume. And I just don't like – I think the offense is just going to look so much different. So how does that look coming out of the gate? You're playing Big Ten defenses now. I know that that's in some circles a little bit of a running joke for some of those programs, but like it is a little bit of a different schedule now. So how do you hold up over the course of the season? I guess if I were to power rank the 5 teams that we all think can win it, I would put Oregon 5th. There's just maybe a few extra questions there compared to some of the other 4 teams.
I think there are teams in the Big Ten that are going to just look like are running through the mud while Oregon's flying through the air. But I do think the physical wear and tear of it is going to add up. The mileage will add up. And I don't believe I haven't seen the killer instinct from him, and that's the thing to me. And Dylan Gabriel's a nice pickup, but I don't know that he's an upgrade from Bo Nix.
Yeah, the quarterback situation at Oregon is very, very interesting to me, and I'm not sure that that's something a lot of people are actually talking about. Not that I'm some quarterback savant, but like it's just you are literally going from one side of the spectrum to almost the other, and I wonder how that's going to work. One man's opinion. Any other final thoughts before we sign off here? This was kind of a fun discussion, watching everybody go back and forth about the teams we think can and can't do it.
It's that time of year. Preseason poll season, SZN.
It is that time of year. This was a fun discussion. We'll probably return to it in various capacities throughout the course of the year, but I have it all marked down. The 5 teams we all think can win a national championship this year: Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon. Alex also believes in Ole Miss and Notre Dame. I also believe in Michigan and Mizzou. Feel free to make fun of us, especially Alex, because he thinks Notre Dame can do the damn thing.
Bring it.
Not sold. Not sold. Also make fun of me because I think Mizzou can. We'll see if that actually comes true. That's all we've got today, guys. We'll be back later this week for another fall camp recap type show, and we'll have some other discussions about maybe what to expect from Alabama scrimmage and the upcoming fan day this coming weekend. It's Monday, so that's still a few days away. We'll have a couple more practices that we'll be able to watch and hopefully learn a few more extra things from this week. In the meantime, though, be sure to rate and review this show wherever you get your podcast: Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 24/7 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 24/7, 24/7 Sports. You can still, I believe today is the last day, you can get 60% off an annual VIP membership, which is a year's worth of 24/7 sports coverage and all the good stuff we do at Bama 24/7 for less than $5. Take advantage of that, especially if you're an Alabama fan. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening, and we will talk to you all again soon.